We're going to finish up this section by turning back to pronunciation. And whereas in the previous pronunciation lecture we focused on individual sounds like consonants and vowels, in this lecture we're focusing on the idea of stress, and specifically syllable stress, the natural stress that appears in individual words. We need to think about what syllable stress is, but first of all, even before that, we need to consider what syllables are in the first place. If you're confident on this, you might want to skip this slide, but if you're not sure about what syllables are, basically place your left hand in front of you, and with the second and third fingers of your right hand, just tap out a beat. Just 1, 2, 3, tap, tap, tap. And as you do this, say the word pedestrianisation. Pedestrianisation. Now, for every beat that appears, and there should be 7 of them, this is a syllable. Each beat is a syllable. And 1, sometimes 2 of these syllables, of these beats, are stressed or emphasized more than other syllables. So, in the case of this word here, pedestrianisation, we have 2 syllables stressed, and that's number 2 and number 6. Pedestrianisation. This lecture is going to focus entirely on this aspect of pronunciation. Let's pick out a shorter word. Banana. What happens if we pronounce it like this? You can try it yourself here. Banana. Or how about this? Banana. Hopefully you understand and you can acknowledge that this sounds very strange, and this is the essence of syllable stress. Syllable stress is the first na in banana. It's the second syllable. Syllable stress is so important because it can cause some confusion. See if you can make sense of this sentence here. I'll try and read it out for you, and you can try to read it yourself. It sounds a bit silly when you put it like this, but let's have a go. I carried the water to the party of 11 people. Any idea what I'm saying here? Well, this should actually be this. I carried the water to the party of 11 people. Another example, a little bit easier to understand because I haven't tried to write down the sounds. But you can try pronouncing this yourself and see how strange this sounds. I am absolutely convinced that all children should learn guitar. Very odd. It should really be, I am absolutely convinced that all children should learn guitar. Okay, so one reason syllable stress is so important is because we need to help people understand us, and correct syllable stress enables them to do so. The second reason syllable stress is so important is that if we use stress incorrectly, we can actually change a word's meaning and or class. Now this is true of something called homographs, which are words which are spelt the same but with different pronunciations and meanings. Let's look at an example. So, before I read this sentence out, I want you to try just reading this yourself. Read this out loud and consider where the syllable stress would go in the word that I've bolded there. Where is the stress in that bolded word? And remember, there are 2 uses of the word here. It should look like this. I have to contest whether this beauty contest is necessary. Nouns then tend to place their stress on the first syllable, contest, whereas verbs tend to place their stress on the second syllable, contest. Now, let's think about some more patterns in syllable stress. We'll come back to that idea of nouns and verbs later, but some other patterns that are important to acknowledge here. Now, first of all, bear in mind that there are lots of different patterns, and stress pattern in English is a huge area. Again, this is an express course, so we don't want to take up too much time with this, but here are some of the most common patterns to think about, and the ones that often contain errors when they're spoken by students. So, suffixes. Suffixes with stress on the suffix itself. Some suffixes are always stressed as the final syllable in a word. These ones here, for example, with the suffix EER. Engineer, mountaineer, auctioneer, profiteer, pioneer, puppeteer. Another one here with E's. Portuguese, Japanese, Vietnamese, Viennese, Lebanese. And the E sound, refugee, employee, addressee, guarantee, referee, absentee, devotee. And the Et sound, cigarette, etiquette, brunette, bachelorette, smurfette. Smurfette there, if you're unsure what that means, that's just from an old cartoon called The Smurfs. Right, let's move on. And now let's look at where stress appears before the suffix appears. So here the stress falls on the syllable before the suffix. That does not necessarily mean that the stress appears in the beat before the last beat, the syllable before the last syllable. It just means that it appears before the suffix. Let's have a look at some examples, starting with shun, decision, application, recommendation, expansion, implementation, cohesion, station. Now we'll have a look at the suffix ity, simplicity, audacity, immunity, modernity, divinity, actuality, urbanity, intrepidity, sanctity. Another one here looking at iv, extensive, massive, inventive, creative, expressive, explosive, inexpensive, conclusive. Another one is with oji, biology, physiology, astrology, analogy, archaeology, genealogy, ideology, eulogy. And finally, let's think about the stick sound. Fantastic, animalistic, sarcastic, journalistic, egotistic, hedonistic, optimistic, pessimistic, and enthusiastic. So in all of these cases, the stress appears one before the suffix. Okay. Another very useful rule when it comes to stress is when we think about compound nouns, and that's when you've got two words together creating a noun, whether that's an adjective and a noun or a noun and a noun. These are compound nouns. If the first word of a compound noun works like a noun, then we stress the first word and not the second. For example, suitcase, the first word is suit. As we know, suit is a noun, so we stress it. Suitcase, typewriter, teacup, headphones, water bottle, dog lead, armchair, sunlight, beauty contest, air conditioning, handshake, pocket watch. All of these start with nouns. Whereas if the first part of a compound noun operates like an adjective, then usually we stress the second word. Let's have a look at some examples. Black market. So you see the first word there, black, works like an adjective. So we stress the second word. Black market, young learner, full moon, mobile phone. You can also say mobile phone, but a bit more natural to say mobile phone. Heavy heart, bad blood, good tidings, old fogey, spare change, soft touch, blank space, stressing the second syllable in all of these cases. However, there are exceptions. There are exceptions to all of the rules that I have just put down. This is an unfortunate case in English, but it's just a case of memorizing. So there are those verb, noun, homonyms or homographs where the verb stresses the first syllable instead of the second syllable. For example, process instead of process. So usually with the verb it would be process, but it's not. In this case it's process. Again, the verb benefit, we stress the first syllable, benefit, and the verb figure, go figure. We don't say go figure, we go figure. So this isn't always the case, and it works the other way around as well. There are sometimes cases where the noun stresses the second syllable and not the first. So with the usual rule, we would say descent, but we don't say that. We say descent, descent. And we don't say concern, we say concern, concern. So this causes me some concern. So do be careful and just check out these exceptions. There are not many, but it's a case of memorizing them. And there are compound nouns which start with adjectives, and yet the stress will be on the first syllable. So loud is an adjective, but we don't say loudspeaker, we say loudspeaker. We don't say blackboard, we say blackboard. Loudspeaker, blackboard. And the other way around as well. There are compound nouns which start with nouns, and yet the stress is on the second syllable, not the first. So instead of saying worldwide, we say worldwide. And instead of saying world leader, we say world leader. Okay? So do be careful around these exceptions. What I would say though is don't stress, pun intended there. Try to notice, record and acknowledge these exceptions when they appear in your everyday listening. It's okay to mess up a little bit on exam day. So if you notice you do that as you're saying it, either correct yourself quickly or just move on. Don't worry too much about it. It's inevitable that it will probably happen maybe once or twice. Just notice the exceptions when they appear. Now, a little bit of practice before we finish this lecture. I'm going to put down a number of sentences on the screen here. You can see them now. I want you to record yourself reading these sentences out loud and then play the sentences back while listening to my sentences to check how accurate you were. Okay? So record yourself, and when you're ready, you can hit play. Okay, let's go through these sentences one at a time. These are all focusing on the rules that we've just talked about. I would object to the view that people are more productive with headphones on. Okay, so object, productive, headphones. Number 2, personally, I feel those who benefit most from simplicity in education are young learners. Okay, so here we have benefit, simplicity, and young learners. Okay. Number 3, I suspect that world leaders have concerns about the increase of global warming. We have suspect, world leaders, concerns. And number 4, the president's egoistic exploits have gained him worldwide attention in journalistic circles. Okay, so a few tricky ones there. We've got egoistic, exploits, and in this case, worldwide actually has the stress on the first syllable, as usual, with a noun at the beginning, rather than the exception that I pointed out earlier. And the reason for this is that it's modifying a noun directly. If you put this word just before a noun, then the stress will come on the first syllable, so worldwide attention. But if you put it on its own, maybe at the end of a sentence, then the stress will appear on the second syllable. So this problem exists worldwide. You can see that. Worldwide, noun, something, something, worldwide. Number 5. Many people protested the validity and acceptability of the protests against refugees. So what have we got here? We've got many people protested the validity and acceptability of the protests against refugees. Notice that protest, protest. And number 6, finally, in order to decrease cancer rates, there needs to be a decrease in cigarette sales. Okay, we've got another double here. So the verb decrease, the noun decrease, and then we have cigarette at the end there as well. So that was just a quick primer on syllable stress. Do make sure to keep up your listening practice and do try to recognize the patterns of syllable stress when you do so. That brings us to a close in this section here, and from the next lecture onwards, for 4 lectures, we're going to be focusing on part 3 of the IELTS speaking test, which is the discussion stage.